Injecting a slasher plot into a classic movie's become a trend in recent years. From Groundhog Day to Happy Death Day, from Last Action Hero to The Final Girls, and beyond. No reason it can't work at Christmas, so let's take a look at It's a Wonderful Knife. Welcome everyone to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and I wished he was here, and therefore he is. It's Tim.
Fa la 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 la.
This is a horror movie podcast. We get together and we talk about horror movie. It's Christmas season, and our final Christmas episode of the year is a newer release. It's a Wonderful Knife. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and we'll start spoiler free as we always do. Before we get into it, I'll just say that you can hit the like button if you're enjoying the show, and you can also go support us over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and get some bonuses. I'll tell you more about that at the end, but if you're enjoying the show, consider the supporty things, because they help. But yes.
Yeah, it's a good way to get in some last minute brownie points with Santa.
Absolutely. It's a great idea.
Even though he famously likes cookies, but
I mean, he's a pretty big guy. I think he'll eat his fair share of cookies, brownies, cakes.
Well, I left some brownies out one year, and let's just say he was not too happy.
Did he kick down your door and go, "Punish!"
Yes.
Naughty! I'm referencing the classic Christmas horror film Silent Night, Deadly Night, for those of you who are not keeping up. But yeah, so okay, It's a Wonderful Life. We'll start spoiler free, of course. It is basically the premise of It's a Wonderful Life, in that a character wishes she was never born, and she sees what happens as a result of that, and obviously things are much worse. The horror twist to it, which is obviously this has, given the title, is that she actually, the previous year, she stopped a serial killer after they killed a couple people, but she stopped them, and then when she wishes she didn't exist anymore, it turns out the serial killer was never stopped, and there's people being murdered left and right, and people she cared about are dead, and oh no, she somehow has to fix it. And that's the premise of the movie. It's very much, we did Totally Killer not that long ago. It's very much in a similar kind of genre or subgenre where we're doing a sort of more lighthearted horror movie with a gimmick, and yeah.
I was going to ask you because we've had a couple of these now, including, like you said, just one, not too long ago, just Totally Killer was just like a few months ago. So yeah, between that and Freaky and Happy Death Day, is it enough now that we can kind of call this a subgenre? Like, I'm not sure what the specific name would be, but
yeah, Final Girls probably goes in. I don't even know what do you call it? Like, I don't know how you, but they do all group together in a sense, and I don't know. You can't say meta horror movie because that would include Scream, and Scream's not the same as these.
Right, yeah.
You can't call it a time loop movie because that's just Happy Death Day. You can't necessarily call it time travel. This is more of an alternate reality, this one. So but they're all very slightly different. But
it's just the idea of taking like a very well-known premise for another movie and then injecting horror into it. I think we're the ones that have to do it. I think we have to think of a name for it that'll catch on.
Yeah, basically it's the horror meets blank.
Yeah.
Right? It's the horror milkshake movie where it puts it in a blender with another movie.
Meets milkshake, you're making me hungry.
Yes, I don't know. It's a weird trend that we're having, and
they all kind of seem like a lot of these. Was this written by the same guy that did Happy Death Day or one of them?
I don't Happy Death, because Scott Lobdell wrote Happy Death Day. I remember that quite vividly.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
That was not him.
I thought one of the
this guy did Freaky.
Freaky. Okay,
that's what you're thinking of. This is the same writer as Freaky.
Interesting. So it's like, it's not only that it's like, oh yeah, we're getting like these same types of movies, but it's also like the same people that keep working on them.
And the director of this did Tragedy Girls, which isn't quite in this vein, but
yeah.
You can sort of see some lineage there. Yeah,
well, sure.
I think when Christopher Landon went to do Freaky, I thought, okay, he's got like a shtick, right? Between Happy Death Day and Freaky, he's kind of built like his identity as a director, and I'm kind of expecting whatever he does next to also have a gimmick. In fact, I think he's already doing something next. It's not a horror movie. I think he's doing something that's more of a family ghost movie, but it seems like there's a kind of a shtick to that. But I don't know. I mean, it's got a good title. If nothing else, get into this. I didn't know how I was going to feel about it, but I was like, you know what? It's got a title that's going to be easy to remember. So,
one thing I do have to ask too. So have you actually seen It's a Wonderful Life? Because I personally I haven't seen it. It's one of those like weird movies that is so classic and iconic, but I've never actually sat down and watched it. But you absorb so much of it through pop culture osmosis. Because it's like. There's like so it's been parodied so much, like so many sitcom episodes and just lines have been referenced and everything. So even though I've never seen it before, I'm very well aware of the premise, but I don't know if there was like deeper cuts in the movie that maybe I might have missed from not having seen it, like
also,
deep cut references or something.
Also, It's a Wonderful Life was the premise for Richie Rich 2, in which Richie Rich wishes he was never born and then goes to an alternate reality where he meets all of his friends.
I hope you guys are doing that on the collector's cut, because there's no other reason you should know anything about any Richie Rich sequel.
I actually just remember it from watching it on the Disney Channel from being a kid. This is, for whatever reason, I don't remember anything that happens in it. I just remember it being It's a Wonderful Life, but with Richie Rich. Not Macaulay Culkin, because he wasn't back for the sequel.
Of course not.
He's too big shot for that. I have seen It's a Wonderful Life. I've seen it a couple times. It's been a while though, admittedly. So I don't think there was any super deep cuts. I think the sort of the location where she makes the wish is kind of similar to where that happens in that movie. They reference the movie by talking about who the angel is and stuff, but
yeah, like I know the names of the characters, so when they said that, I was like, oh, okay, I understand that. But
I it's an interesting premise. I think going into it, I was like, okay, the best of this to me is Happy Death Day with Final Girls like right next to it, right? Those are the best examples of these types of movies. And then Freaky and Totally Killer are sort of the they're not terrible or anything, they're just kind of more mid, right? They're a bit closer to that middle of the pack kind of feel.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I kind of feel like every time I hear about one of these, oh, we're taking this, this movie and then doing a horror twist on it, I do kind of roll my eyes, because it's just like, all right, like, what, Happy Death Day, like, even though that was a couple of years ago, it still feels like they're kind of chasing that, because that was, somewhat popular, notable. It's like, all right, you're doing this thing again, but honestly, like, none of the movies have ever been, like, bad, I don't think. Like you said, yeah, some of them are more mid than others or whatever, but yeah, they're like there haven't been any that I like. I was more positive on Totally Killer than you, but even that, it's not like oh my god, it is so terrible or anything. So
yeah, it's just kind of sort of middle of the road streaming fodder basically. And
sure,
I think that my expectation going into this is that it was probably going to end up feeling like that, but I'm hopeful to be pleasantly surprised and feel a bit more positive about it and want to rave about it, hopefully. So it's got an interesting cast as well. I didn't really know the main couple of girls, but there's a few interesting faces sprinkled throughout. Her dad's played by Joel McHale, who's not necessarily a regular in horror movies, but he's there. You have horror movie royalty with Katharine and Isabelle.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say Justin Long.
No. Just because, I mean, okay, he's been in some horror movies, admittedly. Actually, to be honest,
he's been popping up in a lot more than like I think people are realizing it. Like,
he was in something recently, of course. So I won't spoil it because it's kind of a surprise. But yeah, and obviously did Jeepers Creepers back in the day. Honestly,
he was also in Drag Me to Hell, and then
no one cares about that.
Lots of people like it, and then there's one that came out, I forget the title, but it's one that came out last year or the year before. It was more of an indie one, but I actually thought it was pretty good, and he was actually in the new Goosebumps show that was just a little early, which obviously is more YA horror or whatever, but still like kind of horror adjacent. So I don't know, it kind of feels like he's making the horror rounds.
Honestly, though, the big thing for me with Justin Long in this movie is that he's now at an age where he's playing the seedy mayor of a town. And I don't know how to feel about that, Tim, because like I've always thought of Justin Long as being a young guy. He's always came across as a young guy. And here he is with bad fake tan, really overly fake teeth, doing the cheesy smiles and the bad commercials. And I'm like, this is weird because... like, aren't you like 25 still? I don't understand.
It's a little strange, but I gotta admit, his accent was doing it for me. I couldn't help but laugh every time he talked. I think the accent plus the teeth actually really worked for me.
Sure. So, yeah, but the cast is perfectly fine.
Castable.
That's not a word.
Castable? That's a word.
Oh.
The ability to be cast.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone say it, Tim. I'm not convinced it is a word.
Well, you gotta go on more auditions.
I don't want to be an actor.
Maybe, no offense, but maybe you haven't heard it before because you've never been cast before.
I'm not convinced the people who get cast hear the sentence, you know what, I think you're castable. I don't think they hear that.
Someday they will make a movie based on this podcast, and I'll probably be played by one of the Hemsworths. I'm not sure who.
Oh, the third one.
I think you'll be
obviously,
like Paul Giamatti.
Obviously, Paul Giamatti's a better actor than any of the Hemsworths.
Yeah, but he's not as handsome.
That wasn't the insult you thought it was.
That'd be a good movie. Come on, who wouldn't want to watch that?
Paul Giamatti and Luke Hemsworth. Just yes, that's right. Luke, not Chris, not Liam. Luke.
I'll take it. I'm sure he's probably, I mean, anyone would be, be well served to be even the lesser Hemsworth.
The lesser Hemsworth. All right.
Maybe he just hasn't found his role yet. Yeah.
That's Tim. What did you think of It's a Wonderful Knife?
So similar to you, I was coming in with like pretty low expectations. Like I wasn't dreading it or anything, but like you were saying, I wasn't expecting to be blown away. But I was like, like I'm sure it'll just be like perfectly fine streamable movie. And I'm not gonna say I was like pleasantly surprised or anything, but I thought it was pretty fun. I had a good time. Like definitely not amazing, but it kind of does what I was expecting. Like it's fun. I like the characters for the most part, which it's probably the one of the more important parts of this kind of movie, because like a lot of these movies, I feel like the horror kind of takes a backseat to like the premise and some of the characters and stuff, which is fine. Like it doesn't need to be like super gore or anything, but I would have wouldn't have minded maybe a few better kills or whatever. But I did find myself like caring about the story and what was happening, and I was never bored or anything. So yeah, I think it's a pretty fun time.
Yeah, I'm a bit colder on it. I wasn't to begin with. I thought the setup at the start was relatively solid. It was introducing its characters, it was doing its premise, and it was doing some heavy Christmas vibes, which is nice because it's a Christmas horror movie. But as it went on, I had more and more issues with what the movie was doing, and just how quickly some characters were just accepting absurd things. I can't really talk about a lot of it till we get to spoilers, but so much of the state of like the town and the world once reality's been changed is so inconsistent and confusing to me, and there's things that come out of nowhere. Characters don't seem to be acting appropriately for the town's status that it's currently in. And then again, cannot talk about this at all until spoilers, but there's something that's so out of left field in the last like 10 minutes that I still don't understand.
No, okay, so that's good, because I had questions on that, and I wasn't sure if I missed something or if they just like did not explain a very crucial
they didn't explain
part of the movie.
Shit, Tim. They didn't explain shit.
Okay, yeah, because I was like, I was playing paying pretty close attention to it, but like I assumed in my head like, oh, maybe I looked down at my phone for a second or something and missed something, but
oh yeah, I thought it just kind of, I think it did the simultaneous thing of not doing enough with its ideas and premise. I feel like there's a really great movie that was buried underneath that they just like the writing just wasn't there to actually bring it out.
Sure.
So it felt like it was going off the rails, but at the same time not doing enough with its premise. And then the ending felt so anticlimactic to me. And I don't even mean the final, very final bit. I'm more talking like the final kind of showdown with the killer, shall we call it. I just thought
I agree with
it was
that,
just kind of a like, oh, that's it. Like, I remember I literally said it out loud. That's it. Like,
and it's a relatively short movie. Like it's
90 minutes.
Like what it was like 8. Yeah. Like it, you could have had like 5 or 10 more minutes added to it. Like, yeah, it doesn't need to be super long, but could have added a little bit more.
I think it suffers from something that I think a few of these movies do, which is that, like you say, the horror movie elements take a back seat, and I think some of the better ones get away with that, even though it's still true for them. I think Happy Death Day and Final Girls as well, but Happy Death Day I do think is the best of these movies, and I think the reason why it works is because it's not so much that the horror stuff is better per se. It just does such a good job of everything else, where you really care about the character's story and arc and like what she's going through and the problem solving of trying to fix it. That okay, maybe it's not working as a great horror movie per se, but it's a really good movie still. Whereas, I think with this and some of the other ones, I find myself missing the better horror movie elements because I don't think it's doing enough with with its premise, with its kind of more like, I need to wait for spoilers before I can really properly critique what I want to critique here, because it's all stuff like with where it's building to, where it's going and whatnot. But
I will say, and maybe this is something you'll disagree with, but I did like the main character. I thought, she did a good job of, keeping me interested and throughout and kind of seeing what was going to happen. I do agree with what you're saying. Like when they do the, whatever alternate reality or whatever, where she doesn't exist. There are like definitely a lot of like leaps in logic and stuff where it's like, okay, well, if this is happening, shouldn't this be happening or whatever? And I don't know. Yeah, probably could have done a better way of smoothing those out, or maybe if some of the other elements like the horror stuff or whatever was a little bit better, you wouldn't have minded it so much.
Yeah, it's shocking to me how similar in quality I think this is to Totally Killer. And but by the time I got to the end, I'm like, damn, I feel so similar about both these movies. And when it started off, they were better, but then as it went on, like it kind of felt like it wasn't doing enough to really kind of evolve its premise. And
very premise heavy movies.
Yeah, very premise heavy movies. But I also feel like there's this almost, and maybe this was worse than Totally Killed than it is here, but I do feel like sometimes in these type of scripts that need more drafts, it almost feels like, oh, we're kind of also a comedy, so it's okay if we don't like develop certain things further. We'll just play it off as a joke. And at a certain point, I'm like, I kind of want you to take this a little bit more seriously. Just, I'm not saying be like I don't want you to be Schindler's List, okay? I'm not expecting that level of gravitas. But I just, like,
again,
okay.
to your.
I want to go.
Oh no, just to your point. Yeah, I do think again, going back to Happy Death Day, that did have a much better balance between all right, yeah, there was comedic bits, but you cared about the character and the stories, and then there was still good like horror elements. So, like that definitely did the best job of like mixing everything together, and kind of feels like all these movies are kind of like using that like movie as its model or example, but they aren't really, taking the lessons that they need from it. They're just like, oh, okay, this movie was funny, so we'll just make ours funny too. And then it's like, well, no, there's there's more to it than that.
Yeah, I was going to just offer another example. It's a very different premise, not one of these types of movies, just something like Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, right? Obviously, there's comedic parts because Freddy cracks some funny lines, and it's got kind of a fantastical premise. It's about this guy who comes and kills you in your dreams. You've got all these characters, and in that movie in particular, that franchise, it's like, oh, one of them's got psychic abilities that can link them all together in their dreams, and it's like, okay, this is kind of wacky stuff, but it always takes it relatively seriously in the sense that, oh, we have to do this to survive, and the stakes feel real. In this movie, and Totally Killer, and some of these other examples, it kind of feels like, oh, like we need to have a plot, so there's the plot, but it's really just a vehicle for us to make the jokes we want to make, as opposed to actually anything else. And I think that feels quite hollow to me, and that's how I felt by the end of this, is that it felt a bit hollow. I think there's some nice ideas in there that I will say I like when we talk about spoilers. I will say, though, as well, that there's a scene about 2/3 in, which is effectively the exposition scene, the explanation of what's going on, except there's no reason why anyone should know, and the explanation is just pulled out of someone's ass, and I'm like, how do you know this? You're making a lot of leaps in logic and assumptions here, and they take it as if, okay, that's fact then, I guess we got to do this to fix everything. Like, no, you got this from nowhere.
Yeah, that was pretty unnecessary. I mean, I don't necessarily like it that much, like when they kind of reference the movie that they're, homaging or whatever. But in this case, like, since they didn't really have like a good explanation for why it's happening, like maybe they should have just had a character be like, oh, this is just like, It's a Wonderful Life. Like, just so we can be like, oh, okay, we know what's going on or whatever. Because the explanation, I feel the same way. It's like kind of comes out of nowhere, and you're just like, what? Like, all right.
Yeah, it's just stupid. So it's a frustrating thing. Plus, I think at this point, I think collectively a lot of us are really sick of horror being self-referential and meta. Like,
sure.
So many of them are doing it now that it's like, I just kind of want a horror movie to take itself seriously, please. Can we just do that?
Yeah. It's. I kind of feel like it's been like one or the other, where it doesn't take itself seriously enough, or it's just like deadly serious. Like, where there's like a lot of movies lately that have had like for example, and I'll mention it because I don't think we're gonna do it on the show. But I watched this one on Hulu called The Appendage, which was about this like fashion designer who starts growing like a little like appendage thing on I forget exactly where it was, if it was like her back or her arm or something, but like it morphs into like this little like kind of goblin thing that's like, you suck, like, like, screw you, like, but like, it's like making all these insults at her, and that's like very goofy, but like the movie is like weirdly playing it off as like really serious, and it just felt like very strange to me. Like I don't know, like it looks like so weird and silly, but and like kind of like your point you're saying with Nightmare and stuff, like, yes, like there is something to having the characters take it seriously and everything, but it doesn't mean that like the movie necessarily has to take it seriously or treat it with this like gravitas or whatever. Like
there's a middle ground,
clash of tones.
There's a middle ground between meta, self-referential, everything's tongue-in-cheek, and oppressive, like oppressively dark and serious. There's a happy middle ground in there where something can feel kind of fun, but everything's been taken seriously enough that everything matters, and everything feels like we're having to try and save their, because in Nightmare you care about them surviving. You care, even the first Nightmare Elm Street, you care about Nancy beating Freddy. You want to see, but the premise itself is kind of just a fun premise, but the characters treat it like it's something to actually care about. Whereas here, I kind of feel that streaming fodder kind of disposability to a lot of things, where there's some characteristics of her family members that feel really weird, and this is even when she's in the alternate reality. Even before that, there's something kind of off about some of it that felt strange to me in a way that yeah, I go.
Yeah, I mean, I weirdly did not like Joel McHale in this. Like he I don't know, it felt like he really wasn't doing anything for me or for the character. And obviously, like, we're both really big fans of Community, so like, you know, he's done a lot of stuff outside of that, and, you know, to varying degrees, but like, he has so much goodwill, you know, from me because of that show, and he just seemed like such a dud in this movie. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think he's just a paycheck. He's just there to,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah, I don't know if he's going to be the highest paid actor in this. He probably is. I feel like he's the biggest name in it.
I mean, I don't want to typecast anyone, but like, you know, if you're not having them be like, you know, smarmy, like kind of an asshole that you love, like, I just feel like you're not really using them that well, you know?
Yeah, because of the alternate reality, there's two different versions of him, and neither of them feel like Joel McHale. They both feel like very different characters to what he normally plays.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Oh well.
What are you gonna do?
Is there anything else I would like to... Okay, to be positive for a second, I do think there's a core friendship that the movie tries to do that I do think is kind of sweet, and I think in a better script I could see it working even better than it actually does in the movie, but I do think it's I could see what they were doing with it, and I think it was nice, so that's fair.
Yeah, I enjoyed that.
Yeah. I like that the killer has a look, you know, this all white mask with a white hood and the white cloak.
So what's kind of interesting is I knew going in that the premise was, oh, It's a Wonderful Life, but with a slasher. So like I knew like those were the things that they were combining, but I didn't really understand how that worked necessarily. Because, you know, it's easy to like some of the other movies, like, oh, like I can see what they're gonna do if they insert a slasher here, but like with this, it's like, it's kind of weird. It's like, all right, what do you do with a slasher in that premise? And what they ended up doing with it, I actually thought was quite good. Like, I liked that premise a lot. But again, they don't really. The idea is very good, but they don't really go that far with it. Where you like, they don't really explore it enough. Because, like when she, goes to whatever you call it, the alternate timeline or whatever, where she's not born, it feels like the killer is like, very much a backseat, and it's much more about,
he's an afterthought. For sure.
It's like, okay, I got to figure out how to get back and how to, warn people and stuff, but we're not seeing the killer that much. Apparently he's been very busy.
There's a couple of like random kill scenes where they just kind of, but they feel just so kind of tacked in just because, oh, we have to have a kill around now. It's not like, she's ended up with a group of characters that were all introduced, and then they start getting picked off as she's trying to protect them or something like that, which I guess is a little Totally Killer in terms of how I'm describing it out loud like that. But even Totally Killer, I thought could have been much better than it was. Like, see if Totally Killer was... they're going to huddle down at the... because there's that one point in that movie where they go to like someone's like house in the woods, right? It's like a getaway house, and they're like, oh, let's just go hang out there. And I think my hope when I was watching that is that, okay, they're not taking it seriously like she is, but then someone's going to die, and it's going to turn into a, oh shit, we're out here in the woods, there's a killer somewhere outside, or maybe in here with us, and now they're all going to take a treat. And I thought it was going to turn into more of a horror movie. Instead, like, all of it kind of played out really quickly, and we didn't really get that. Very, very, within a death, they were basically back in town with other people again, and the movie then played out however. And I almost feel like what I would hope for here is that because she has knowledge the killer doesn't know about, and no one knows who she is, that she finds that she has an advantage, partly because she knows who the killer is. Like, she unmasked the killer before the reality change, but just in the sense that she's trying to protect everyone who's left because she still cares about some of these people potentially, but it really doesn't do anything like that where she is trying to protect anyone. It's all just about trying to get home to the right reality rather than helping anyone who's here. And that never really comes that into it either, even by the end, I don't think. Not really.
No.
I mean, I guess it kind of does slightly right at the very, very end, but not in a huge way. I don't know. It's this thing where I feel like they're just kind of passively going through the premise, and there's so much of this movie that's her trying to talk to her parents who don't know who she is, or trying to talk to a friend who doesn't know who she is, and I get that that's something that had to happen when she first went over to the alternate reality, but I feel like we spend so much time doing that right up until like the last 30 minutes. Like we spend so much of the middle of the movie doing stuff like that. And like you said, the killer's just taking this back seat. Like you'll occasionally cut to the killer killing someone, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the plot in any way. I don't even think the main character finds out about some of these other deaths. Like at one point someone gets killed at a party, and I don't think the main character ever even becomes aware that it happened, because it doesn't matter to her. It doesn't affect anything. So, so why should we give a shit either?
And I also don't really quite know what the motivation of the killer is. Like, I think I understood it at the beginning of the movie when it was just a few people, but then, by the, second half or whatever, it just seems like he's just killing whoever.
Yeah, there's kind of a convoluted explanation, but it didn't really make much sense to me either. So, it's a whole thing. All right, I think we're dancing around spoilies. We should probably just give the warning. Unless there's something, was there something you'd like to say before we go into spoilers, Tim?
No, you did make me think of one joke that I actually thought was pretty funny, but we'll just talk about it when we get there. Okay.
Well, in that case, spoilers for It's a Wonderful Knife. You have been warned. So, the movie actually there's a joke right at the start of the movie that made me hopeful that I was going to like this a lot, because it made me laugh in the first minute, and I was not expecting that. The movie opens with Justin Long. He's like the mayor, and he's got like a campaign video to get re-elected or something like that, and it's like him doing all these, and he's got the big fake white teeth, and he's like smiling really unnaturally, and he's like, yes, this is Angel Falls, and I'm the mayor, and we're a proud people. And at the end of the video, he goes, and I'm the best, so F the rest, and it's bleeped. And that legitimately made me laugh, because I didn't see it coming. And I thought, oh, maybe this movie's going to be funny. And then I didn't really laugh at much else after that, to be honest. But that got me.
I had a few chuckles here and there. Like, it's the... To me, it's the kind of funny where, like... I don't know. I'm not talking about this opening part, but just the movie in general, where, I don't know, it feels like they think that what they're doing, like, you can tell that the script probably thinks a lot of what they're doing is very funny. And I'm not saying that it's like cringy or unfunny or anything, but it's not a lot of stuff that will make you laugh out loud. Like, it's just a lot of like, okay, huh. Like there was a few moments here and there where I chuckled, but overall it's not.
I actually did think of another
laugh fest.
Yeah, there was another joke I did laugh at, actually, now I'm thinking about it. We'll get to it, but there was one other one.
But in general, though, I actually thought actually like Justin Long quite a bit in this. Like, I mean, I mentioned it before, but the character he's doing with, like, and maybe that's one of the reasons why I like it, is because he's very much doing a character where, like, a lot of other people are just kind of boring in my opinion. But yeah, like the voice he's doing, like, it's weird, because I'm guessing this is like either Midwest or Northwest or something, but he has like, it feels like a very like Southern gentleman kind of accent, but like like that, like with the teeth and everything. It really worked for me, and I was hoping to see more of him in the movie, but he's unfortunately not in it that much.
That was the really weird thing, right? So one of the big complaints, I guess we're skipping ahead a little bit here, but in the opening of the movie, he turns out to be the killer, right? Like, the slasher villain kills an old man who owns like some of the buildings, and he's wanted to build Wayne Tower, effectively. It's a big building with a W on it, and he needs to get rid of this old man who's important in the town, because he needs his land to build his thing. And the killer kills him first, and then starts killing some teenagers at the Christmas party. Fine, whatever. And then comes after the main character, and the main character, what's her name, Winnie, she defends herself and attaches like a car battery to him, and that electrocutes him. And it's like, okay, and I knew this was the premise going in, is that she stopped the killer, right? And then later on, she was going to like wish it undone or whatever. So she takes off the mask.
And just while we're there, I will just say, just a comment. I actually did like his costume quite a bit too. Like it was like this all white angel. Which, I think works for the the premise, and I thought it actually looked pretty cool.
I just appreciate it because it was like a distinct look. Admittedly, it's not like the best for stealth.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Oh.
Like, if it's I mean, you can really only attack during Christmas time when it's very snowy and stuff, so it works then. But otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking that as he was running around in the dark, he was like, hiding behind trees and shit, and I'm like, you are wearing a bright white outfit. I mean, it feels like people are going to see you coming, but
yeah. That's kind of one thing too, that they don't really like state it, but that's also something I thought that was funny would be like, he's so evil and malicious that like I didn't think the killer was going to be him, because it's like, oh well, that's way too obvious. But I like that he clearly like didn't care about like hiding it or not seeming too obvious.
Yeah, he even makes like a veiled threat at one point early on where he's like, oh, you be safe now, sort of, but so like, and also just to mention the kill in the old man, right? Because he kills this old man, and I liked his entrance to this scene because there's a snowman at the front door, right? So the old man opens the front door,
right, yeah.
and there's a snowman, and then the killer sort of like jumps through the snowman at him, and I'm like, okay, that's an interesting visual. However, I do have to critique the kill itself, because he slits the old man's throat. That sounds fine. You see it in the shot. They show the slitting. Also fine, right? I'm here for it. However, they clearly did this with having the actor just sort of like slice through nothing, or maybe just drag it over his neck, and then they've CG'd in like the wound appearing like around the knife, and it looks really bad. It's got that disconnect where, whenever you're watching a movie where someone like touches like a CG creature and you can tell they're not actually touching anything, it's got that. The motion of the knife slicing is just like, it's clearly just slicing thin air. And but there's there's a wound opening and blood coming out, so it has a real uncanny valley kind of quality to it, which took me. It should have been a fun thing, but instead I was like, no, I just think it looks bad. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think it stood out to me as much, but I don't remember it being that good. Maybe if I go back and watch again, maybe I'll be like, oh yeah, that does look pretty bad.
Yeah, this is the sort of thing where once upon a time it'd be a prosthetic, and they'd have like a fake wound on the neck, and the point being is that the blade, even if the blade is not technically real, it would be going through something physical, so that it would look better than what this did.
Yeah, it's a shame because it's just happens so much in especially like a lot of more low budget, like straight to streaming kind of stuff. Like, I hate it, but I do just kind of live in the fact like, all right, yeah, it's probably gonna be CGI blood or whatever.
We're in the bad timeline, but hey.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he tries to kill like a bunch of teenagers. Main character Winnie kills him instead, takes off his mask, and we see who he is. And what really bugged me is that, so I will go back and talk about the other stuff and all the things it sets up for the characters, but when she makes her wish and she ends up in the alternate timeline, and she finds out that in the year, because it skips a year ahead, in the year since these killings, and because she wasn't here, she didn't stop the killer. The killer's been killing someone like every couple of weeks, basically, right? So this town is in like absolute turmoil because there's been like 25 victims at this point. And I couldn't believe how little we see of Justin Long after this point in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's a scene early on when she's in the alternate reality where Justin Long comes up to her and says, I'm so sorry this happened to you, but I want you to know you've got a friend because I'm the mayor and I'm friends with outsiders. And she's acting really tense because she knows he's the killer and it's uncomfortable. And I thought, okay, I can see what they're doing. We're going to do a slasher movie where the main character knows who the killer is the whole time, and that's maybe an interesting twist on the formula. Okay. But then she doesn't give a shit about him for like most of the movie.
It's very strange because, all right, she keeps saying like, we have to stop him and blah blah, and it's like, okay, well, it should be pretty easy. Like, you know who he is, you know like where he lives, like just yeah, get whatever weapons you need and just like do it.
And don't get me wrong, like I immediately had the thought, look, reality's changed. There's an obvious twist here where the killer's not the same person anymore, and that does kind of happen later where, you know, we have a new killer, but it obviously he's still the original killer, so he's still important to the whole thing. But it was so wild to me that we weren't spending this movie with her trying to get to him. Like, that felt like it's such an obvious thing that part of it should have been, and it just never really happened until the very, very end.
Yeah, and that could have been really fun too if like every time, you know, because that's what they kind of do in like that first scene where she's about to say who it is and then he comes out of nowhere. Like if you have something like that where every time she's about to say, you know, something to someone, like he kind of pops up or, you know, is somewhere close by or whatever. Like there's a lot of fun stuff you can play with that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's just nothing.
So to go back to Before the Wish, though, let's talk about all the other stuff it introduces, because there's some important stuff here. So,
and I do just and while we get into it, I will just say I actually thought this stuff was really interesting. Like this is another thing that I feel like, you know, you could almost do like a whole movie about this, because I can't think of many other horror movies that, you know, start off with someone killing the killer and then like, you know, seeing the ramifications of that. Like I actually thought like this stuff was really interesting, seeing how like people deal with it, how it affects their life and everything. Like I don't know, this stuff I thought was interesting.
I think one of the weird failings of the movie is that I do think the first reality is more interesting than the alternate one that she goes to.
Sure. No, yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Which is kind of a problem. So we have Winnie, and she has a brother. I don't know his name, but she, oh, there you go. That sounds right. She's got a brother who we know is gay, and I thought this was a good little bit of character building where like the mother's all proud because she's given him like a little rainbow like Christmas tree ornament, and she's like, "See, I bought a gay thing for my gay son. Aren't I a great woke mother?" kind of thing. And he's nice about it and says, "Oh, thanks, Mom." And then Winnie comes up behind him and goes, "You're going to have to put that in every tree you ever put up until she dies." And I thought, oh, that's a good little bit of character building. They're bonding over the cringiness of their mother, but she was meaning well, so it's all very sweet. Like, I thought, okay, this is solid character building. And we're introduced to Katharine Isabelle, who's the aunt. That's the mother's sister, and she's got her girlfriend with her. And it introduces that she's quite friendly with her niece, and they get on well. And okay, so this is all, you know, character building and stuff, right? Fine. The other big things is we get to meet a few of her friends. She has a best friend who, shockingly, like, because she dies here in this part of the timeline, she's actually just gone for the rest of the movie. I thought she was going to be alive in the alternate timeline because I thought maybe, and this is something the movie doesn't even try to do, I don't think, is that reality changed even before the killer tried to kill anyone, because her not existing meant that, you know, certain other things wouldn't have happened. Because I was thinking, oh, maybe her best friend's still going to be alive in this reality because she didn't exist, she didn't go to that party with her. So maybe she stayed home and didn't.
Exactly.
But it feels like everything that changed only changed from the previous year where the killing started. It doesn't feel like her existence affected anything before that day, which is weird. You know, you think there'd be a few knock-on effects, but...
No, I agree. It feels like a lot of the stuff that maybe they're setting up that you think is going to be more important is stuff that's just kind of forgotten, or they just kind of mention it, you know, once they get to the new reality, but it's just like, okay, then that's done with. Yeah.
It's like, because I thought they were going to do something, because she kept taking it for granted that everything else she knew was accurate. And I kept thinking, oh, there's going to be something where she's wrong because this reality is different and because things have changed. You know, because she didn't exist as a 10-year-old here, she didn't, you know, cause someone else to not do something that, you know, knock on, and so on. Yeah. But it never happened. There was never a single moment where one of her assumptions based on her reality was wrong, except for after the killing night. So, I don't know.
Oh, yeah. A quick question. So in It's a Wonderful Life, is it the same thing where, like, once he, you know, wishes he was never born, that he's in a new reality, but he can still, like, interact with it and stuff? Because I was always under the assumption that, like, the movie was about the angels showing him what the reality would be like, but he would not be, like, able to interact, like, almost like he's like a ghost watching, you know, what that reality is like. That's what I thought, but I don't know if I'm wrong.
I think you're close to. I mean, it's been a while since I watched it. I I don't remember him interacting a ton, but I also don't think it's like Scrooged where he can't even like. I think he gets to talk to people still and learn about them by talking to them directly. But I don't think he like it's been a while. I don't know. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, because I mean that's what I was under the assumption it was going to be about. Because if you wish that I was never born, then like
you wouldn't exist. Yeah.
You know, yeah, like so I think it'd be more like you're a passive viewer of what's going on versus
this.
Oh no, I'm here now, but there's no record of me.
This plays out more like Marty McFly coming to the alternate 1985.
That's actually it's funny you mentioned that. Yeah, because this did give me more Back to the Future like 2 vibes than it did. I mean, admittedly, I haven't seen It's a Wonderful Life, but like it felt more like that than.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, the other big thing they introduced at the start of the movie is that there's a weirdo character, and I'm using that word because that's what all the kids call her.
Yeah,
I was very conflicted about what age these kids were meant to be because I think there might be.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, because I think there might be towards the end of high school, but at the same time, everyone's just kind of like drinking booze at this party. So I'm like, is this at a school? Doesn't feel like they'd be in a school. They're just walking about with bottles of vodka and shit.
Yeah, the only thing that made me think it was high school would be because some of the people wearing like Letterman jackets, which I think, you know, to me that always screams more of a high school thing than a college thing. But the way they're acting, it does seem more college-ish.
Well, even bigger than that, the main character is applying for college the year after, which would imply this is high school years at the start.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But even if
that's right. Yeah, because she wanted to be a going to photography or something.
But even if it's the end of high school, though, like the way they bully this girl that they call weirdo because she's just kind of quiet and different is like this is like a 8-year-old's bullying tactic. But they're just throwing shit at her and saying, "Don't talk to weirdo. Weirdo's weird."
Yeah.
So she ends up in the second main character actually, but in the first part of the movie, you just sort of, you know, the main character waves at her to say hello because she came to catch her eye. And then our other friend jumps in and says, "Nah, don't talk to her. She's weird. You'll get cooties," or something to that effect. So
it does feel very much like that, like old school kind of bullying versus, you know, like I feel like a lot, you know, newer movies will have the kind of bullying that I feel like goes on more now, where, you know, it's more like online stuff or, you know, people criticizing you for, you know, maybe not being like almost using like modern like cliche stuff, like, you know, like, oh, like almost carrying like too much, like where like I don't know, in a weird bullying way, if that makes sense, but versus like you were saying where it's, you know, just more like straight up like an 80s bully where they're just like, yeah, like you freak, and throwing stuff and pushing them around.
Yeah, I wish the movie felt more like an 80s movie in like every other way except that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the important things it sets up. One of the big things I wanted to talk about though is that so she survives this night. Her best friend's been murdered, and we skip a year later and we see that now her dad, because we didn't even mention this, but her dad worked for the killer. He worked for the mayor. He was like. And he was always working in like Christmas Eve and stuff, which actually sounds a little Scrooge-like. Actually, is that he was making the dad working Christmas Eve, but he's now running the real estate in town, and he's like making a video with his son who now works with him, and that's a whole thing. And the big thing here is that our main character Winnie is very depressed. She's still not over the fact that her sister, her best friend, was killed. And everyone else is trying to just be happy and enjoy Christmas, but she is just miserable. And the scene that kind of sets her off, to begin with at least, is that so her parents, like, it's Christmas Eve, and her parents give her a present. They all open one present on Christmas Eve, and she opens the present, and it's like a pink sort of like workout suit, not quite a track suit, but like a workout suit. Which is actually, this led to the line that actually did make me laugh, that I was thinking of earlier, which is, "You gave me a lesbian tracksuit," and then Katharine Isabelle, her aunt, who is a lesbian, said, whoa, we would never wear that. And I thought that was quite funny.
That's funny, yeah.
But yeah, she gets this thing, and they try and Katharine or Isabelle says, hey, like, that's not cool, guys. You never give a woman a present that implies she needs to lose weight, right? That's just not something you do.
I mean, like they said, like nothing ever to do with their body, or like something along those lines.
Right, and like it's like, okay, fine, they don't get that. That doesn't mean that it was malicious. But then, like, a minute later, you hear like some noise, and she's like, "What's that?" And Catherine Isabel's like, "They got your brother a truck." And she goes outside, and there's a giant truck with a big red bow on it. And she's like, "Are you kidding me? You bought him a truck?" And this is where I feel like something is weird in the writing of the characters, because I get that they're trying to do this thing where the parents are they don't know how to talk to her about her trauma, but the way they ignore her pain here and just kind of like not give a shit about her is so just like, it just comes across as so evil, right? The fact that the brother immediately sees her and goes, "Oh no, it's for both of us, you can drive it anything," like, the brother clearly gets how this is going to make her feel. The brother's trying to help, and the parents are like, no, we got him this because he needs a truck, and we got you something you need, which, going with the previous conversation, does not sound very good. But it just, like, and the way she storms off, clearly upset, and then the dad just turns, Joel McHale just turns to his son and starts describing the engine and like how many gallons it can do or take or whatever. And I'm like, you're coming across so dismissive of your daughter right now. I thought the writing was weird there. It felt too, like, far gone.
Well, the thing is, it might have not been that bad if we've had more setup or something with them, but the characters feel like such blank slates. Like,
yes.
Even, like, you know, when you're talking with Joel McHale, like, you mentioned that he was working with Justin Long, but I never understood, like, okay, does he hate working with them? Like, is he mad that he has to work all the time, or does he actually think he's a good boss? Because I would assume that he was kind of a doofus and he hates that he has to work all the time. But then with the alternate reality, he's like in love with them, which, you know, I don't see why, you know, that would have changed it or whatever. But I don't know, like, yeah, I just never really felt like, you know, that I got much of an understanding of with these characters. Like, all right, are they clueless? Are they cold?
We never get a reaction from him that his boss killed his son or tried to kill his son, right? We never get that reaction that this killer who almost killed both of his children was the guy he worked for. Because we skip ahead that year, we never get him reacting to that. Like, it still feels like they should all still be processing this, and it's weird that they're all okay to just celebrate Christmas as normal. Like, this was a very traumatic thing that they've all went through. But it's only Winnie. She's the only one who apparently still feeling the effects of it. But
I think one of the most interesting interactions he has is with the Justin Long's brother, who's like the sheriff. Like, you know, when he's talking to him, and, you know, he's like, "You killed my brother." Like,
yeah, I thought you were going to say more. Yes.
No, I was just pointing out that, like, I think that was something that was a little more interesting than, like, and, you know, rightfully would, you know, kind of set her off, you know, versus, like, yeah, stuff that her parents didn't feel as impactful or whatever.
Yeah, and then she goes to a party and catches her boyfriend cheating on her with one of her friends, and apparently this has been happening for basically the whole year, ever since the whole, like, best friend being killed thing happened. And they're basically like, "Look, we've been doing this for a while because you've been so out of it, you've not even noticed." Like, it's kind of a relief, to be honest. So this obviously sets her
almost
off.
Like that weirdly makes it better.
I know.
It's still very shitty.
And then she runs into the weirdo girl again, who's called Bernie, for the record. And this is where she goes out to like the docks at the water, and she looks up and she sees the Northern Lights, and she makes a wish that she was never born. Now, I will say, I'm happy that this was obviously a wish she didn't think was going to, you know, she was just speaking to herself. She didn't, it's not like some magical being showed up and offered her a wish, because had she known that there's a chance it might happen, given she stopped a serial killer, that's a pretty big thing to know that you're not going to be there to do, right? For the sake of everyone else. So I do appreciate she didn't actually, you know, say it as if it's something she expected to happen. but it did. So she's in this alternate world, and this town is so messed up because all these murders that the party that was there before is now like all the kids are all doing like crystal meth. like all of them are just complete utter addicts. And this was actually one of my problems with the movie, is how inconsistent the town is in this alternate reality. Like, on the one hand, it's like, okay, everyone's like depressed in this kind of ghost town because of all these murders, so like the parties, all these kids on crystal meth. But at the same time, it still felt like people were going out and like just not even caring that there's a murderer who's killing people this consistently.
Right.
And people are just going to house parties and not caring that there's a killer on the loose. I don't know. It was weird.
Well, that's one of the funny things. Like, I was thinking of is when he mentions that, like, oh yeah, the killer's been doing this every couple of weeks or whatever. There's been like 26 or 27 deaths since then. I'm like, okay, so like, wouldn't like the FBI or something be involved? Like at this point, like
you would think so. Yeah, you'd think an entire task force would like come into it. I would say that all this is in her head, right? In this like moment where she's contemplating suicide or whatever, and she imagines all this, and then she's learned some lessons by doing her soul searching. Except there's one thing at the end that makes that impossible. We'll get to that later because I've got problems with that.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. So she tries to go home, obviously. No one knows who she is, and they tell her to get lost. But we see that her mum's now a drunk. Her dad's this angry man now because it turns out that her brother was killed. Because she wasn't there to save him, their only child, Jamie, was murdered. So they're miserable about this now. And obviously the mayor's still around and whatnot. Not that we really see him that much. After that one scene of him coming up and talking to her, he's then just kind of gone for like almost all the movie.
Yeah. And I did think it was kind of funny that the mom is like, yeah, she's constantly drunk, but then she also just has like a boy toy that she's just sleeping with, like very much out in the open.
Yeah,
which is like
Joel McHale doesn't care apparently that she's got a bit in the side. Yeah. One of the biggest things that really irked me, or one of the first things that really irked me, is that so the movie plays out where she goes and like ends up befriending the weirdo girl and tries to convince her that she's from an alternate reality and stuff, which she kind of does along the way. I don't even remember how she does it, to be honest, now I'm thinking about it. But, I don't know, knows enough about the... Yeah, there's a whole thing where she goes back to her house and she's saying she knows who the killer is. She says it's the mayor. And then the weirdo girl gets a little bit, well, I don't know. And she starts to get scared, like maybe Winnie's the killer, right? She doesn't know. But then the killer conveniently jumps through the window to try and get to them, which is, by the way, very random. Especially since it's not like he even really chases them afterwards, I don't think. Like, it very quickly gets wrapped up. It was basically just to prove to Bernie, the weirdo girl, that Winnie's not the killer.
Yeah. Well, okay, so, like, when she first gets to that world or whatever, and, you know, she's talking to the sheriff, and she's like, oh, I know who the killer is, and then Justin Long appears out of nowhere.
God, the sheriff is the mayor's brother. The mayor's brother, who was just a guy with an OnlyFans in the original reality,
right,
has become the sheriff because the killer killed the sheriff sometime soon after Christmas.
Yeah, so I guess that's kind of your explanation as to, okay, why have the police not stopped this guy? Like, you'd say, like, all right, well, he's either very, incompetent, or, you know, since he's related, maybe he's, even if it's subconsciously or something, turning a blind eye or whatever. But, I mean, either way, though, like, you think more people would get involved, but whatever. But, so, what I figured is, okay, like, because... Yeah, he's like, oh, she says she knows who the killer is, and Justin Long's like, oh, you do? Then you should tell us. And like, you can tell that he's like kind of eyeing her up and stuff. So I assume that a lot of what would be happening then is like he would be chasing her down, and then that's what I kind of thought that this scene might be. But then, like you said, he doesn't really chase them. It's kind of just more like, I'm popping up just to remind you, that I'm here or whatever.
Yeah, it doesn't feel persistent. It doesn't feel like they're on the run. It feels like after this, they just go and hang out somewhere, and then, they bond, and they have this whole thing where because the weirdo girl works at the old movie theater, they go there and they watch an old movie together, and they end up holding hands, and it's clear that weirdo girl's kind of falling for her, and it's like, okay, I see what the heart of this movie is going to be, is that this reality is going to come to an end, however we solve it, and our main character is going to go back to our world, and she's going to go and find this weirdo girl and strike up a friendship knowing that she cares about her from this reality. That's your heart, I get it. But there's some wrinkles along the way, which we'll get to, that make it a bit more confusing than that. But while she's asleep, she wakes up and weirdo girl, and I'm calling her that because they keep calling her weirdo, so it's easier to remember than her name.
Yeah.
But she's basically done some research, and this is where we get the exposition. This is where I get my first huge, like, gaping red flag. Not that a flag can gape. Gaping just sounds bad. And I want it to sound bad.
Yeah.
So, she's done this research that, it's weird. Like, we're not close enough to the Arctic to get the Northern Lights, but it's happened here before, and it always seems to correspond to a violent death. So if you violently killed the killer, that's what caused the Northern Lights. So, my theory is that the Northern Lights are magical, and they gave you this wish. And now the Northern Lights are starting to fade, and when they're completely gone, you'll be stuck here forever. But if you violently kill the killer again, you can wish to go back. She says this, and they basically just take this as fact from this point in the movie. And all I could think was, you're making huge leaps and assumptions.
Absolutely.
How could you possibly deduce that from this? Particularly the part about how, okay, the murders or violent deaths cause Northern Lights to happen here. That's weird, but at least I can accept, it's happened like 50 times. You can correspond, you can cross-check them, and it's happened several times. What is your evidence that the Northern Lights granted a wish? You don't have any.
Also, she says they correspond with a violent death, but would you think something that happened a year ago as being corresponding?
I was assuming that it was like carryover from... Oh, no, you're right, because... You know what? Actually, you've got an excellent point. Is that it had been a year in the original reality when she made the wish. It was a year after the violent death.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a window. And you got a good bit of time there. You don't have to rush your wish. You get some time to think about it.
You get a year to make the wish, but then only, 1 day to, go back?
Maybe 3 or 4 days. It was a little bit longer than that. But yeah, much shorter than a year. Very good point. So this was something I just flat out didn't like. I was like, okay, this is a bad scripting moment. This is just an exposition dump. This is basically the research scene, or the scene in a horror movie where you go to the spiritual Mexican lady who knows about the ghost, right? And she explains stuff.
Yeah.
Except there's not actually something there to explain it. You're just pulling it out of thin air. Which,
yeah, it's very bizarre, and it's like, obviously this isn't the point of the movie, so it's not like we need airtight logic that you need to explain for 25 minutes or whatever. But yeah, it seems like there's such easier things you could do, even if you want to do something stupid, the people that founded this town had a legend that said if you do this then this happens, or whatever.
Sure, yeah, something about... I appreciate the point of what they're trying to do. They're trying to give her a goal, right? And I always like that in a movie, you have a third act, you want the character to have a goal that'll achieve the victory, right? You want to make it simple. And that's what they're trying to do here. They're trying to say, here's the thing that needs to happen to save the day. And even if it ends up being incorrect, this is what they can shoot for in the time being. But it has to be based on something more than this. This was just so, lazily written. The way they just come up with this, it took me out of it. And it actually leads to my next thing that really pissed me off, is they go back to her house with her family, right, to Winnie's house, and they knock on the door, and the dad, Joel McHale, just slams it shut, doesn't want to talk to her, and she knocks on the door again and yells, "I'm not going anywhere, this is my house too, blah, blah, blah." And Katharine Isabelle, the aunt that she's good friends with in the main reality, opens the door, and she's like, so what, you're saying you're part of this family, but we all don't know you? It's like, yeah, because I know this about you, and I know that about you. And she's like, okay, those are things you could Google. All you've done is tell me, like, you know, where I went to school or whatever. And she's like, okay. And then she tells her a specific story. She's like, oh, you once got your ass stuck to something because you wore this type of thong in 1999. And okay, I completely get that would be the first little kink. That would be the first little kink in the armor, right? That it would make her go, that's weird. How could she have known that? That would maybe start to get her gears going to maybe possibly accept that she is a family member who is from an alternate reality. What does she do in the movie? She sort of goes, oh yeah, that's pretty good, and opens the door and lets her in. She, like, that's it. She's basically convinced. One fact, which I admit, yes, it's a very specific fact that no one would know unless she told her, but that's it. She's basically on board from this point on. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
that bothered me.
A lot of these things just feel like, you know, first draft ideas where it's like, whatever, if you want to write that down when you're making the first draft of the script, that's fine. But it feels like, yeah, you can think of something, you know, more solid, or yeah, you know,
I think it's a twofold problem. I think problem number one is that they've basically just treated her accepting this as a joke, but I want them to take it more seriously in that. And problem number two is that, frankly, part of the excitement of a story like this is, how does she convince them? The idea that she's going to convince someone that she is this alternate person from a reality that's better than this one, that she's fighting to get back. How does she convince them to believe her? Like, I want to see the version that actually earns it, the version that actually convinces her aunt, you really are my niece from an alternate reality that I don't know. I want to see that play out, because I think it would be very satisfying to see the moment on her face where she realizes, holy shit, I believe you. It should feel like a big, huge character moment that she's convinced her. And she says one thing and she's like, yeah, that's actually pretty impressive. On you come.
Well, you think the easy thing to do, or what, you know, like what would make sense to the story or whatever, you know, would be to mention something about, I forget if it was her wife or girlfriend, you know, from earlier, like, you know, if she knew some story about how they met or fell in love or something, because then you're not only showing proof, but you're also kind of hitting with that emotional beat. But like, instead, I think she just asks, like, you know, a little later on or whatever, just asks her, like, so what happened to her? And she's just like, oh yeah, she was killed too. Yeah, it does feel like very throwaway.
It's such an afterthought when that comes up. It's so much later. Yeah.
So I do think it was around this time where that was that joke that made me laugh that I mentioned earlier. So I forget if it's when she's talking to her aunt or Joel McHale, but maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. But I think it's this scene where, like, yeah, she knocks on the door, and I think one of them says something like, so, like, who are you exactly, or whatever, and then Weirdo kind of leans in and she says, you know, make a lie, and then she just goes, I'm your daughter from an alternate reality. Like, she just flat out just says the truth, and that kind of made me laugh. I thought that was funny.
Yeah, okay, yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad. Yeah, so she goes and talks to Joel McHale, and she's trying to say, hey, I knew your son, and he used to play the football games, and he was good, and blah, blah. But then when she tries to implicate the mayor, Joel McHale gets very defensive and says, how dare you, he paid for my son's funeral. But then the killer attacks when they're at the house, kills the mom, tries to kill the aunt, and...
Just for the record, I hate everything about like these scenes.
Yeah, well, because there's no like interesting choreography, because they do a whole thing here where they knock the killer down and the killer's like unconscious at the bottom of the stairs, and they basically do that bit from Scream 2. Remember in Scream 2 when they knock the killer out in the car and they have to like climb out over him to get out the window, and it's really tense and it's, you know, it's like they basically try and do that, but the direction's just not good enough to actually like sell this idea that it's scary having to walk over him. Probably because it's really a really open space. They could literally just climb over the banister if they really wanted to.
Yeah, so first, I mean, even before that, I didn't like this stuff with Joe McHale where he like flies off the handle and is like talking like so protective of the mayor. Because again, I just didn't get enough of his character in the other reality to know like, all right, is this a big departure for him? Like, did he hate the mayor in the other reality and now he's like all into him? But then also like, yeah, why is he so defensive and like, just not even willing to like hear her out at all or whatever.
Or admittedly, it might have been effective if in the other reality before it changed, if we got him talking about the fact that he tried to kill his kids and how much he hates them, so that here when he defends them, it would have like a sort of like, oh shit, this is like emotional whiplash kind of thing.
Perfect. Yeah, there you go. And then like you were saying, then he attacks and it's just not that interesting, and then they have to like jump over him. But this scene was so weird. I did not understand at all like why they were treating it like so like this is such a scary life or death thing to do. Because first of all, my thought was, all right, he's unconscious on the ground, but if you're not sure if he's like dead or alive, like why don't you use this moment to like beat the shit out of him to make sure that he's not gonna come up? Like I was like, oh, like don't tiptoe around him, like jump on his nuts or something, like or like you were saying, even if they don't want to do that, then just climb over the banister or something. It's not that hard. It was like super weird to me the way the scene played out.
Yeah, and obviously when he's the last one to like try and climb over him, and she decides to like, no, I need to kill him. Like I need to kill him to get back home and fix everything. But she decides to unmask him. She picks up the knife and then she unmasks him, and then the twist here is it's her dad. It's not the mayor. And it's like, oh, he's been killing instead of the mayor. But it's still quite clear that the mayor was the original killer. It's just that Joel McHale has become his puppet, which is really weird because it means he knows who killed his son.
I'll be honest, I didn't really understand this scene. Like, I didn't know what his motivation was. Like, and like you're saying, like, okay, does he know that the mayor is the killer? And
he must do.
Yeah, I guess, but then it's just so weird that if
because the implication from the rest of it is that the mayor was killing people. So he killed the old man who wouldn't sell the house because he wants the land for his building, right? And he then went after, apparently he keeps going after the kids, at least to begin with. He went after the children of people who own businesses who didn't want to give up their shops or their stores or whatever. And it was all just a strategical thing. But then the implication is that he got a taste for killing and kept doing it anyway. But then we find out that Joel McHale at some point became the killer instead. Did he just snap after the death of his son and started killing? Was that independent of the mayor? Because it feels like he was doing it on his behalf, but I don't know.
I truly have no idea, and I don't think the movie wants you to think about it because they don't really offer
that's the problem.
Much reasoning or explanation.
I think it murkies the whole thing up, and at this point I'm like, okay, I'm so kind of out of it and giving a shit about what's going on with the dad because it just feels so weird. So, but at least I can kind of understand, okay, they're trying to make it tougher for her because now she has to kill her dad technically. If the whole thing is she has to kill the killer to get home and the killer's her dad, now she has to kill her dad. But all I could think was, but when you go home, how are you going to look your dad in the eye knowing that he could easily just become a killer? Like, so it's a bit wild. But anyway, they go back to the movie theater and they're like try to solve or come up with plans.
And this is when the mom and her boyfriend or lover die too, right?
Yeah, I think they die in this whole segment. Yeah, I don't even remember how they died.
So I mean, that's a big problem with the movie is that again, like the horror elements, like the kills and stuff, are just very forgettable. Like I just watched this yesterday, and I was, it's not like I was pretty invested in the movie. I wasn't like looking at my phone and stuff, but there's still parts like this that are just forgettable to me.
Yeah, I think a lot of the kill stuff. I mean, we kind of alluded to it in the spoiler-free section, but somewhere in the middle of all this, there was a kill of the guy at the party, the one with the flashing lights. Oh,
right.
Yeah. But it doesn't affect anything, so that's why I've not mentioned it again. It's just kind of there. So they go to the movie theater and they're like, "Hey, we have to kill him And at this point, Catherine and Isabelle's character is like, yeah, I believe you. You're my niece from another world. This is great. Yeah, let's kill him. So they're going to try and lure him in as a trap, and this was kind of painful because I'm like, okay, you're so close to what I like, because I love characters being proactive, and the idea of them setting a trap, of them like they have mannequins sitting in the movie theater so they can jump out and kill him when he comes in. That's like how trying to lure him in somewhere to kill him is a fun idea. The problem is though is that there's a red herring where the boyfriend, or her boyfriend and the girl that he's with comes in instead, and then once that happens, the killer just shows up a minute later, and them trying to deceive the killer is completely irrelevant. And what's even worse about it is that after a little chase scene, she just stabs the dad / killer, and that's it. And this is where I went, wait, is that it? Is that the final showdown with the killer? It kind of is. I mean, it's not the final showdown with Justin Long, but it's the final showdown with someone in that outfit who's trying to kill them. Right, yeah. And that's it. And then she's like, wait, why am I not going home? Why is the Aurora Borealis still fading away? Where's my magic wish? Yeah. It's the whole thing. So, because the sad part is that right after this, and Catherine Isabelle's character gets stabbed during this as well, so she's gone now too, is that they introduced the one thing here that I really like. This is the one little twist on the plot that I think is actually a really great idea, is that when she tries to make her wish to go back home and it doesn't work, Weirdo Girl reveals that this was going to be her last Christmas, and that she was thinking of committing suicide. And I thought to myself, oh, this is an interesting twist, because then in It's a Wonderful Life, it's the character who experiences the other world that is the one who is going to commit suicide. And this is kind of this thing where now when the main character goes back to her reality, we're to compare it to Back to the Future again, it's almost like Marty going back at the end of the first movie and still trying to save Doc. It's like, oh shit, I'm back, I've got my family back, my brother's alive, everything's back to normal, but shit, that girl might still be trying to commit suicide, and by this point she cares about her. By this point she has feelings for her, right? Because obviously it's not happened yet, but by the time they do go back to the regular reality, they kiss right before it happens, right? Because I was thinking this was a romantic thing. It felt like it was building up to a romantic payoff for quite a lot of the movie. So I was thinking, you know what, I actually really like this element. I like this element where they've kind of like became friends, they've fallen for each other even romantically, and this girl who everything we saw from the start of this movie is that she was called names, she was thrown stuff at. The one weird thing about all that though is that I didn't understand why she was going to the house parties. I'm like, this isn't a school thing, you don't have to be here, you could have just stayed home. But regardless, so that's a minor quibble. I thought, oh, this is a really fun idea that they've cared about each other, and she's almost being very selfless because she's helping her erase this reality, and she's erasing like, hey, I'm the weird girl, I'm the one no one likes, and if you go back to your reality, then I go back to not having anyone. So she's almost being very selfless on top of everything else. I thought this was a great idea. We'll go back and talk about the climax with Justin Long, because I've got thoughts on that. But since we're on this particular talking point, Winnie wakes up in her own bed at the end of the movie. Her family's back, her brother's back, her parents are apologetic for not, talking to her about her trauma. Quite right, because that was really weird and messed up. And she's happy to see everyone. Her aunt's back, her aunt's girlfriend's there. She's all excited, and she realizes, shit, I've got to go and get Bernie. I've got to go and get Weirdo, because she was going to commit suicide. She said this was going to be her last Christmas, and now we're back in the real reality. Nothing might stop her. So she starts running to go. My first problem with this is that the tone of this run to go to her is like so happy. It's really weird. I'm like, aren't you supposed to be scared right now that she might commit suicide? And instead she bumps into her ex-boyfriend and his new girlfriend and is like, stops to say, oh, I'm happy for you two guys, actually. You're fine. Be in love with each other. Hold hands. It's great. And she runs off and there's upbeat music playing. And I thought, I want to feel tense right now. I want to feel tense because this character, the one character in the movie you've kind of made me care about, might be about to end her life. So that's problem number one.
I mean, again, I haven't seen it, but it feels like they're trying to copy It's a Wonderful Life here, where
for sure.
I feel like that I've seen at least that scene from the movie where he's like, I think she even says like one of the same lines where she's like, "Hello, like Merry Christmas, movie house," or whatever. So which is fine, but then like you said, it's again, it's clashing in what should be a very tense, like, am I gonna make it in time kind of scene,
Arguably, if they handled this correctly, it'd be easily the most tense thing in the whole movie, is caring about whether or not she was going to commit suicide. But she gets to the door, and she's fine. Bernie opens the door, and she's like, "What are you doing here?" And there's a moment of like quiet, and then this is the part that blows my mind, and I hate it, Tim. I hate it. Weirdo girl Bernie smiles and reveals that she remembers everything. What? What movie? Okay, right. So my first thought here is that, are you trying to suggest that because they were kissing when the wish happened to bring her back to her real life, that somehow that's magically kept her with these memories? If that's the case, and that's completely out your ass if it is, does she remember both realities now? Like, cause she grew up in this other reality where Winnie didn't exist, and now she's also her regular self from this reality as well. Have those two realities merged in her brain? Does she have two sets of memories?
Yeah, that would be tough to deal with. You can make a whole movie about someone trying to reconcile that in their head.
Oh, jeez. Like, this felt like...
It's cheap.
It's cheap. Like, because to me, I thought, okay, the magical little thing you can do at the end, and this wouldn't be original, but it's the idea is you have Winnie go to Bernie, and you have her start a new friendship, with the idea being that if the chemistry's really there, that it will lead to the romance again. And this is just like her starting that friendship, and it'll just end in a hopeful note of, oh, it's probably going to happen. But instead, they take this easy way out of her just being like, yeah, I remember everything, come in and let's be girlfriends. Okay. It's so weird.
It's I was very surprised by it, and then it ends very abruptly after that. So it's almost like the movie's like, we don't want you to even think about it. Here's the credits. Like, don't worry.
It doesn't hold up to any thought. It's so stupid.
Yeah. And it's also just not like a good, like, it's just way too convenient and abrupt, and it just doesn't serve the story well. It's a very odd choice, like you said, because it would work perfectly fine to just have her open the door, and like, we know that weirdo is desperate for friendship, companionship, and everything, so it's not like she's gonna turn her away or anything. Like, it'd be very easy for her to, like, open the door and then just be like, hey, like, I know you don't know me, but like, I care about you, and like, or just want to let you know you have a friend or whatever, and then they can, or I just want to know if you want to talk to someone. There's so many different things you can do that it's a lot sweeter.
Yeah, I'm not saying like she has to be up on a ledge and she has to talk her down or anything, but just the implication that maybe, like, hey, maybe she was about to do it in 10 minutes. You don't know. But the idea that her showing up and like offering this friendship is going to like make her day, that could be really, really sweet. And instead, they just give you this cheap, like, easy ending. It's didn't like that. That said, though,
I agree.
Yeah, we skipped over so when the wish doesn't work the first time, right? So they've killed the dad, but it's like, hey, like the Northern Lights is still disappearing. Oh, maybe we have to stop the mayor because he's the real evil. Okay, makes enough sense, I guess. And this
Only killing Justin Long grants wishes.
And this is where things get really weird for no reason.
Yeah, I legitimately did not understand what was happening in this final scene.
Because I honestly was getting to the point here where I'm like, okay, this has to turn out to be a dream or something, because now it's just doing weird things that make no sense. And that is that when they go to... There was like a mention earlier on that he has this event that he's doing for Christmas, which, by the way, a lot of the middle of this movie like forgets that it's a Christmas movie. It doesn't really matter that much. But he's doing this thing where he's doing like a gathering where he's on a stage and he's
lighting a tree or something.
Yeah, something like that. But he's basically saying, the poster said, are you naughty or nice? Only Mayor Waters will tell you.
Oh, right.
So
Yeah.
they go up to this thing where he's on the stage, and he's like, "Oh, this family are nice," and he gives him a present or something, and then he says, "But my brother, the sheriff, he's been naughty." And he's like, "What? What brother?" He's like, "Well, you've put in for a transfer. Do you think I wouldn't know about that?" And then he kills his brother in front of this audience, and two men in white coats take the brother's like dying body away. And then this is where I think I started to notice that all the people in the audience were all sort of like frozen still, like they're in a trance, and they all have like green eyes, like bright green eyes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is happening? Is he got like magic spells or something? I think the implication, and I may be giving the movie too much credit here and like giving them an excuse. I think the implication is that he himself made a wish with the Northern Lights, and that's why these people are all just going along with whatever he's doing.
I assume it has something to do with that because, like you said, the eyes are kind of this greenish tint, which is like the color of the lights.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, yeah.
I'm guessing, but it is such a bizarre thing to be like all of a sudden like, oh, he has superpowers? Like, is this a new thing?
I know this is a movie about someone making a wish and then going to a reality where that wish is true, right? I know that that's a big fantastical thing, but other than that, there's nothing in the movie that is supernatural or whatever.
Right,
so
yeah.
All of a sudden, him having people like a cult all just staring with these eyes like they're being possessed is really out of nowhere.
Yeah, and like, not that I think it would have been better, but like, if you wanted to see that, like, you could have something where earlier in the movie, whenever she tries to bring up his name, like, people's eyes flicker, and maybe that's why, like, oh, whenever she tries to tell people, they, like, dismiss her, like, not that I would have enjoyed that necessarily, but at least it would have fit the story more and laid some groundwork versus what they do here, which is just so out of left field. And
I guess the implication is that maybe that's why the dad was killing people. It's not that he actually wanted to, it's that he was being controlled.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I don't like it, but I guess
I don't like it either.
Yeah.
But it's which all of this is just really, really strange, and it's like, is this what he wanted originally? He dreamed of being like in such a tyrant to this town that he could make them do whatever he wanted, and he's just happy he's got his tower with the big W on it. And
I mean, I don't know what his motivations are. Like, at first it just seems like he's a greedy business guy, but then it seems like he's a serial killer who likes to kill, and now it seems like he's like someone that likes to control people. Like, if he can control people, like, yeah, at some point you don't have to kill people anymore because they can just do like whatever you want, like, so unless you just like killing, which I guess he does, but it's kind of all over the place.
Yeah, it's so unfocused and so unsure of what it wants to do. The few genuinely good premise ideas that it has, or the one great character idea it has with the weirdo girl and her, like that friendship, and then her saying that she was going to commit suicide, and that being something that'll happen in the regular reality when she goes back, because she wouldn't have had this adventure with the main character. That is a great little idea, and I thought it was a cool thing, but they went out of their way to like just ruin it at every turn. Like, once they introduced it, that was it. And even some of this climax is really comical, where they start punching Justin Long like sort of in turns, and that was really weird. And even Justin Long's wife grabs a knife and tries to stab someone.
Yeah, and then like at one point he falls off the stage, and all like the people like descend upon him like they're like zombies from like George Romero or something. But then again, it's like they don't do anything, and I'm not sure why they did that.
It just needs a better defined, like more confident story where it feels like so many of the ideas here just kind of like, oh, we had this other random idea, so we're just going to throw it in, and then it's just going to kind of peter off as like it doesn't really wrap up properly, and then then the magic lights appear in the sky and send her home, so we don't have to explain anything. And I just none of it's that interesting. Like I can see a movie where something weird happens, and then maybe it's like done in a way where you're like, oh my god, we have to sit and theorize how this happened. But this doesn't feel like it's got like a design behind it. It just feels like random and stupid.
Yeah. And then, like, not that it would have made it better, but if it was something where it ends up like all being a dream or in her head, like, you can get away with more leaps of logic, I guess. But like you said, because they have to have that little thing with Weirdo at the end, it's like, all right, well, it couldn't have just been a dream because she experienced everything too.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's what I was saying earlier on. I said there's something at the end that proves that this all really happened, and that's the fact that the other person remembers it all. So there's no wiggle room to suggest that, oh, this was just in her head, or this was something of her like thinking through what she said and coming to a healthier conclusion. Nope. It's just that. It's rough. I don't know. And I felt kind of bad at the end as well, because unlike It's a Wonderful Life, like when she comes back at the end, her best friend was still murdered, and it feels like that doesn't matter anymore.
That's very true. Yeah.
She's just happy to be back. It's like, I don't care about her anymore. It's fine. Let's go on with our lives.
Yeah, like there's still like trauma and stuff she's gonna have to process. I mean, like, granted, it's like, okay, yeah, there's relief that I exist and this is a better timeline, but there's still stuff that I have to work on.
Yeah. So, frustrating. It's what I felt like I came into this being like, oh, it's pretty middling, because I do like some of the ideas, and I think the start of it's relatively strong in setting everything up. But like, talking about it, the more I realize just how much I dislike like what the back half of the movie does with everything.
Yeah, I mean, I'd still say that I'm a little more positive than you, but I mean, really pointing out some of the faults is not gonna do it very much justice score wise.
No, which I guess, I mean, you can have any final thoughts you want, but would you like to rate It's a Wonderful Knife?
Well, one thing I did want to mention too, great title, but I feel like the knife wasn't really like the killer does use a knife sometimes, but it didn't really feel very like prevalent.
Yeah,
so
I feel like a better use of this title would be like, don't copy the plot of It's a Wonderful Life. I know that you're kind of taking that name, but I feel like you just do a Christmas horror movie where the knife itself is really important, and that's all you need to do to justify the title.
Sure, yeah.
But
but no, I mean, I think this review, probably did skew a bit more negative, at least certainly that I intended. But with all the stuff that we said, I do think it is still a watchable movie. Like, it's very easy breezy. I do think the main characters in Winnie and Weirdo are likable enough that it carried the movie for me. And again, even though he's not in it a ton, I really like Justin Long's character, and there's enough interesting stuff with the premise that and that kind of first section that I was at least still, I had enough fun watching it that I wasn't like ripping my hair out or like shouting at the TV screen. But like we pointed out, though, there were definitely parts that were very frustrating that feel like that you just either, I don't know, just didn't think about the script hard enough or care enough to fix like some pretty easy stuff.
It makes you appreciate how intricately smart like the Happy Death Day script is, the way it juggles all those characters she interacts with, and it gives them all a bit of meaning in her story. Here, not so much.
So maybe a little lower than I was originally intending, because I think going in I was like, I had enough fun, and I liked some of the characters and the premise and stuff, that I was leaning more towards like maybe something like a 6 or a 6.5. But talking about some of the stuff that I didn't like did make it stand out more like a sore thumb. And again, it makes it more annoying that it's stuff that's like, oh, like, you didn't have to do this. Like, there's much easier ways that you could have gone about it. Like, just talking about stuff like this this weird kind of final act at the end, and then the last little stinger bit with Winnie, and what Winnie and Weirdo and stuff. Yeah. So I don't know. It is. I think you said frustrating is kind of a good word to use there, because there's a lot to like, but then it's kind of bogged down with these mistakes. But I think I'm gonna go with 5.5. It's I still had fun watching it, and there are things that I liked, but then there's just a lot of these really weird stuff that stood out, but not the worst by any stretch, but yeah.
Oh yeah, we've definitely done worse. I mean, there's no question. So did you give it a number?
5.5. I think I'll go with.
Yeah. It is so frustrating because it keeps getting in its way, on its own way, or it gets in its way of its own premise, or just some of the humor. Well, I did laugh a couple times. There's also times where some dialogue felt a bit try hard, like when she's deciding that she has to kill her dad to get home. She's the line, like the camera's like right in front of her. It's a flat shot, which is typically, if you do someone sort of straight on like that, you're doing it for a comedy line, and she says, "All right, let's kill my not dad," or something. It was a line like that, and it felt really like try hard, like you're trying so hard to be funny with that, and it did not work. So, yeah, I think it's an easy enough, pleasant watch to have on, even though I can't really recommend it all that much, because I don't think it really capitalizes on its premise. And there's better examples of taking a classic movie and adding a horror spin onto it. And I think it falls into the same trap of Totally Killer and some of the weaker ones, which is that it treats it like a silly movie, that they don't have to actually have weight behind anything they're doing. And even worse, it has ideas that seriously could be great, and then it just goes out of its way to make it not great. This is tough. I think, all that said, I think I similarly came in with a score in mind, which is similar to what you actually ended up giving it, and I think I'm going down as well based on all the conversation, because it's made me more mad at it. So I think I'm going to go with a 4.5.
Wow.
Yeah, 4.5.
Can't argue with it.
Yeah. It frustrated me enough. I thought I was going to like it more based on the first like 20 minutes or so, and then it just kind of kept sliding as the movie went on. So hey ho, that's the movie. That's It's a Wonderful Knife. That is our Christmas episodes done. There was obviously a bonus episode, which was a Christmas episode. If you're a patron at $3 or up, you get access to that. So go check out patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. And of course, you get bonuses for other shows. Me and David do a couple of monthly shows on there. They're exclusive, like Extra Reels, which is some of the worst movies of all time, which might appeal if you like us talking about bad movies. You can get.
I remind me after the show. I got one for you.
Oh God, I get enough recommendations from Tara, and I need to take recommendations from you. Oh dear. But that's the show. I think we're planning on doing a winter themed episode for next week. So we'll see how that goes, but look forward to that. But that is the show. So thank you very much for joining us, everyone. Give us a nice 5-star rating on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast from, and like, subscribe, all the usual things that we always tell you. But hopefully you've had a nice 2023 with streams. Actually, the next episode will be before the end of the year, so I don't need to do the end of the year speech. I'll do that next time. But hopefully you have a nice Christmas, everyone, and we'll see you afterwards for more scary good stuff. But thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Keep watching scary movies. Merry Christmas.